thing is, German soldiers were not permitted to surrender unless they ran out of ammunition. And that July day in Normandy, they wanted to surrender, and they were getting rid of their ammunition by dumping it on us. They were throwing hand grenades, shooting off pistols and rifles, burp guns, machine guns, mortars, 88s, everything. And we, the dumped upon, were crouching in foxholes dug into hedgerows. These are walls of solid earth, a meter thick and 2 meters high, with trees growing out of it. And this was excellent cover. Unless you got a direct hit, you're probably okay. Anyway, there was a light, we were answering their fire by calling down artillery barrages on their hedgerows. And there was a light drizzle, was Mother Nature's pox on both our houses. The date was D+37, July 13th, 1944. Starting from Utah Beach, the 7th Army Corps had cut across the peninsula, trapping some German troops against the sea and cut off from supplies. They were running on empty stomachs, and they would get their next meal in a prisoner of war camp. So effectively, they were killing us as fast as they could so we could feed them as soon as we could. But that's the logic of war. And the sooner they ran out of ammunition, the better for us, because since D-Day, A Troop had lost 7 dead and maybe 22 wounded. But our mood was good because we were advancing toward the end of the peninsula, and with the war going well, we could think seriously about going home again. So if you're wondering why cavalry troopers were crouching in foxholes, so was I, because I had enlisted in the cavalry to avoid being drafted into the infantry. And nobody told me that when the cavalry dismounts, it becomes infantry. Well, of course, we teenagers, we didn't know anything about the service. Pearl Harbor had been attacked just 6 months after my high school graduation. And during 1942, I had to pick a branch of service or else get drafted in 1943. So, as autumn leaves were falling, I raised my right hand and took a step forward into the cavalry, which was just then trading in its horses for jeeps and armored cars. Well, I won't bore you with induction details, but to follow this story, you have to know about the GCT, the General Classification Test. This was a nonverbal test given to everybody on induction. We were asked to look at drawings and reason about them under a time constraint. For example, we were shown a row of cubes and rows of cubes stacked in various forms, squares, rectangles, pyramids, and we had to put down the right number of cubes in the picture. And we were shown drawings of right and left-hand threaded screws in all different orientations. And there was an arrow showing the direction the screw was going, and another arrow showing how the screw was turned one way or the other. And we had to say whether the 2 arrows were consistent. Things like that. At any rate, the GCT score could tell an officer how well you could and how rapidly you could reason and observe and reason accurately. Well, long before my enlistment, I was attracted by a advertisement in Popular Mechanics that for a few bucks offered to send me the GCT test, sample problems. So I sent for a few bucks and got the test, and over some months, six months maybe. I did some serious cramming, and at the Chicago Induction Center, I aced the GCT. And of course, we were not given the results right away, but a few months later, on a cold or cool morning in California's Mojave Desert, I was approached by the troop clerk, Red Johnson, Corporal Red Johnson from Minnesota, and he starts this dialogue. He says, Sussman, he says, do you know that you have the highest GCT in the squadron? Now, a squadron has 3 line troops and a headquarters troops, about 500 men, more than 500 men. So I say, oh, what's a GCT? I'm playing it cool. He says, that's that test you took at the induction center. Your score was 184. I say, well, what's normal? Still playing it cool. So he says, well, normal's 100. The next highest score was 134, some lieutenant in C Troop. So I say, Red, what did you get? Now, a troop clerk was picked for being sharp. Real sharp, because he runs the troop, and he makes sure everybody gets what they need when they need it. So he says, oh, I got 111. I say, well, that's interesting. And interesting, but forgotten, with 6 more months in the desert, and after that 9 more months in East Texas and Southern England, and there's D-Day and a month of combat, and forgotten by me, but not by Army records. No, because that day in Normandy, that rainy day in Normandy, a call came down from Foxhole to Foxhole down the hedgerow. Sussman, go see the sergeant. And, well, a cloud of dirt in my face woke me up. And I got my rifle with my helmet and rain poncho, and I ducked down to the end of the hedgerow, and there sitting in his foxhole was Sergeant McDermott, and he had a mean look on his face. He says, Sussman, what did you do? The captain wants to see you. I didn't do nothing. Now, the double negative was obligatory. Anyway, I ducked down past 2 more hedgerows to troop headquarters, and so I heard my name called, and I looked around, and there was Sergeant Captain Benj was in a deep foxhole, beautiful foxhole, and he says, Sussman, get down here. There's mortars coming in. Well, it seemed to me it was a little quiet back there, but I quickly joined him. And he says, Sussman, what did you do? The colonel wants to see you. I said, I have no idea, sir. A salute, no double negative. He says, well, Corporal Buck has a jeep waiting to take you to squadron headquarters, so look sharp. So another salute. I double time to the roadway, and during a wet, bumpy jeep ride through quiet fields, Isaac Buck asked me what this is all about, and I told him I have no idea. Anyway, Colonel Dunn's tent had a folding card table on it with a light bulb over it, and some papers and a telephone on top of it. He had a small filing cabinet next to it, and there was more, but my eyes were fixed on Colonel Dunn. He's sitting down on a chair, a folding chair at the table. He was a West Pointer, short, trim, wry, and he had a low but commanding voice that always impressed us. Gave us a lot of respect. And anyway, he says, he answered my salute with at ease, trooper, and he asked a series of questions. And to each of which I said, "Yes, sir." So this was a series of questions. He says, "Your name is Marvin Sussman. Your rank is private. You are a rifleman. You serve in a line platoon. You have more than 30 days of combat experience. You are over 18. You are under 21. You have a high school diploma." Then a minute of silence while he looks up some records, and then he says, "Trooper, you are the only man in the squadron who qualifies." Sir, I was really puzzled. He says, "Trooper, you are going to West Point for 4 years. They will make you a officer and a gentleman. You will leave immediately. Corporal Buck will get your duffel bag. Sign this," handing me a sheet of typed paper. I must have been standing there with my mouth open, stunned, silent. My mind was racing. That damn GCT. 4 years and then an Army career. Out of a foxhole into hell. This damn war was almost over. The Krauts are giving up. The Red Army is near Warsaw. Our army, we captured Saipan. Our Air Force can destroy Japan. If I can stick this thing out for a few more months, I could be home free. And now Colonel Dunn wants my signature. Now. Moreover, I had enlisted for combat service because I wanted to accept a risk that I could not ask others to take for me. And now Colonel Dunn was taking away that risk. I would have to tell my grandchildren that I spent the war in a classroom. Choosing a branch of service was the most important moral decision of my entire life, and probably in the life of any volunteer. During most of 1942, it looked very much like we could lose that war, in which case we would either be dead or we would wish that we were dead. And under those circumstances, we were choosing the amount of danger we were willing to face. All my friends were making their choices. Air Force, infantry, Marines, Navy. Nobody was mentioning the Coast Guard or the quartermaster, except as a joke. Now, was that male bravado? Yes, there was some of that, but if we survived, there was also a real need to look in a mirror without shame for the rest of our lives. So, going to West Point for 4 years Avoiding the risk, leaving it to others, did not seem right. And how could I sit in a classroom listening to a lecture while troopers were lying in foxholes, listening to incoming death and destruction? And how could I concentrate on facts and numbers and words when I could remember faces and names and wounds? No, going to West Point did not seem right. See, A troopers were not just friends. During more than 20 months, I had eaten over 2,000 meals with these guys. I was closer, and in a month of combat that turned friends into brothers. I was closer to a couple of those guys than I was to my own brother, 5 years younger than me, to whom I rarely spoke. So leaving them for West Point did not seem right. Well, Colonel Gunn must have noticed my hesitation, because he explained further. The 7th Corps has a quota of 5 men with combat experience to be sent to West Point. And by God, one of them is coming for my squadron! Now, an Army Corps has over 2,000 squadrons. So out of every 400 squadrons, only one would send a cadet to West Point. Yes, sir! That was the only possible response to a commanding voice that was no longer low. Colonel Dunn's Irish eyes were not smiling. No matter how I got that high GCT score, I was at least intelligent enough not to argue with the colonel. So I reached underneath my rain poncho into my shirt to pull out my glasses so I could read and sign the paper. And he says, "Trooper, you wear glasses?" "Yes, sir." "Trooper, you may return to your unit." Nowadays, West Point will accept you with your eyeglasses, your false teeth, your hearing aid, and maybe with your artificial limb and a pacemaker, possibly. But that was 1944. So back to the foxhole and the 88s. I explained the trip to squadron headquarters as a need to straighten out some records. The truth would have just brought on a ribbing, well-deserved and never-ending. And so I could have saved a few bucks and all that time spent cramming for the GCT and all the turmoil of that day. Anyway, the thing is, I now have another counterfactual to mull over. What if I had not reached for my glasses? Probably on arrival at West Point, they would have accepted me with good enough eyes. So how would that have altered my life? Well, I would probably get to play poker with future famous generals. I could even be a famous general. Or I could be killed leading an infantry platoon in Korea, etc. But all that's fantasy. The reality is that on that rainy day in Normandy, during that 3-minute wet and bumpy ride through quiet fields with Isaac Buck back to that foxhole in the 88s, I did feel relieved, if not exactly happy. But a few months later, soaking my butt in the Hurtgen forest or freezing it in the bulge, there were moments, oh yes, there were moments when I really missed being in West Point on the Hudson.